All right, if you step outside Lake County, at least a few days ago, even today, maybe the next few days, and take a deep breath, you really don't want to do that because the air quality is pretty bad. Under the National Weather Service, Lake County has an air quality alert as high ozone levels and wildfire smokes combined. And you can probably recall that most of Chicago's northern suburbs, which include us, were at unhealthy or very unhealthy air qualities. Now, here's the thing. That smoke isn't from anything burning here. It's not a factory fire in Waukegan. It's not somebody's questionable bonfire in Gray's Lake. That haze traveled over 1,000 miles from wildfires burning in Canada to sit on top of our county like an uninvited house guest who also happens to be toxic. Now, I remember the last one vividly. All day it looked like heavy fog rolled in, that thick gray, can't quite see the end of the street kind of fog. Except fog doesn't smell like wet charcoal or a barbecue gone wrong. This one did. It smelled kind of bad, like someone grilling in every backyard in the county simultaneously with stuff they probably shouldn't have. And your brain does this weird thing where it goes, cookout, but no, not a cookout, that's some sort of fire. It's one of these strange sensory experiences that you might be getting used to. So today, I wanted to actually dig into this. How often does this happen? How does smoke from another country end up hugging the ground in Lake County when everything we know about smoke says it rises? Does Canada even fight the fires, or do they just let them burn? And the big one here, how dangerous is this stuff really? And what can you actually do about it? Because I don't know about you, but staying inside and just waiting it out doesn't really feel like a really smart strategy. But anyway, let's start with how we got here, because this is genuinely pretty wild. Canada's boreal forest is absolutely enormous. Canada has roughly 1.5 million square miles of forest land, and 75% of it is boreal forest, mostly coniferous trees. Pine, spruce, which, fun fact, is basically nature's kindling. It's a forest the size of multiple Europes that's evolutionarily designed to burn every so often. Now, in a typical year, there are over 9,000 forest fires in Canada, burning an average of 2.5 million hectares. That's just in a normal year. That's Canada on a regular summer Tuesday. But the not normal years are getting more frequent. In 2023, Canada had an unprecedented wildfire season. 6,623 wildfires burning over 45 million acres, when the 10-year average was about 6.8 million acres. 45 million acres. That's an area bigger than the entire state of Illinois, burned in one season. And guess who was downwind? That intense 2023 Canadian wildfire season made Chicago the country's second most polluted major city that year. Chicago, second most polluted, not LA, us. What an award that you just don't want to win. And it keeps happening. Just last year, smoke from Canadian wildfires left this area's air quality ranked the worst in the nation for a stretch in June. In just the last few years, Chicago has recorded fully unhealthy air twice. June 27th, 2023, with an AQI of 175, and July 31st, 2025, with an AQI of 174. So, if you're keeping score at home, 2023, 2025, and now 2026, this isn't a freak event anymore. This is a season. We have smoke season now around us, like it's a thing on the calendar between graduation parties and back to school. Now, here's the part that genuinely bugged me, because it goes against everything we think we know. Smoke rises, right? It's like one day of knowing things. Campfire smoke goes up. So how is smoke from northern Ontario hugging the ground in Libertyville 1,000 miles later? Shouldn't it be way up in the sky by now or gone entirely? And the answer is, it did rise. Boy, it did rise. These fires are so massive, they created their own weather. The biggest ones generate what's called a pyrocumulonimbus cloud. That's basically a thunderstorm powered by fire, with dense black clouds that can whip up winds of 200 kilometers an hour. And that whole system acts like a chimney, launching smoke miles up into the atmosphere, sometimes all the way up to the jet stream. And up there, the winds are absolutely ripping, 100 plus miles an hour. So that smoke can cross from Canada to Illinois in just a day or two, pretty easily. On top of that, changing wind patterns can carry this stuff hundreds or even thousands of miles, which is also why it's so hard to predict where the bad air will show up next. And honestly, a lot of the time, that's where it stays. We get those milky white skies and freakishly red sunsets, and the smoke just cruises overhead at 30,000 feet, minding its own business. There's no smell, it's no problem for us on the ground, and those events happen more often than you think, and most of us never even clock them. The trouble starts when something drags it back down. And in the Midwest in the summer, two things absolutely love doing exactly that. First, high pressure system. Those big stagnant heat domes that give us the sunny, sticky, miserable weeks. Inside a high air pressure system, the air is slowly sinking. So if the smoke plume rides into one of those, it gets carried down with it like an escalator to the surface. A National Weather Service meteorologist described it this week as the smoke getting trapped by the jet stream and pushed down to the surface. And that's when we get the smoky, hazy conditions. Second, and this is the sneaky one, temperature inversions. Normally, warm air near the ground rises and it carries pollution up and away with it. But sometimes a layer of warm air parks itself on top of cooler surface air, and it acts like a lid on a pot. Nothing gets out. So the smoke comes down, hits the lid, and just sits there in our layer, the one we breathe, for days sometimes, until a decent front with some wind and rain finally flushes it out. And on these hot, humid days, the air gets heavier and the atmosphere doesn't vent itself well. The National Weather Service said basically exactly that this week. That's why it also looks like fog, because it's behaving exactly like fog, pooled in the lowest slice of the atmosphere. And here's your home test. If you can smell it, that barbecue wet charcoal smell, it's not up in the sky anymore. It's down here with you. High altitude smoke has no scent at street level. The smell is the warning. Last week in particular, we also got a pile-on. Unhealthy ozone levels across northeast Illinois prompted the alert first, because with record high temperatures, ozone was already elevated before the wildfire smoke even arrived. So the air was already gross from heat and ozone, and then Canada said, hold my maple syrup, and sent the smoke down on top of it. Honest question I had, because from down here it can feel like they just let it happen. The answer is more interesting than I expected. More than 90% of Canadian forest land is publicly owned, and the provincial and territorial governments are responsible for fire suppression. So that's not one national fire department. It's a patchwork of fire departments, and their strategies genuinely differ. Yukon, for example, lets most of its fires burn, jumping in only when they get close to urban areas, whereas British Columbia and Alberta try to suppress the majority of fires wherever they are. So yes, some of that let it burn to thin the forest thing is real policy, at least in the more remote areas. And honestly, there's ecological logic to it. The boreal forest evolved with fire. The problem is, the fire doesn't know it's supposed to be small and educational. Part of the challenge is pure geography. A lot of these fires are lightning caused, which is quite normal in Canada. And even when lightning fires start in very remote areas, they're hard to access and can become quite large in a short amount of time. There's no fire hydrant in the middle of northern Manitoba. There's just barely a road. Now, does the US help? Absolutely. And this part is actually kind of heartwarming. There's a long-standing agreement between the United States and Canada, first established in 1982, for sharing firefighting resources, air tankers, crews, incident management teams. During that monster 2023 season, the US sent 2,774 wildland firefighters to Canada. And it goes both ways. In January 2025, Canadian resources helped fight the fires in Southern California, with air tankers from Quebec and crews from Alberta and British Columbia. Even folks from our neck of the woods pitched in. Minnesota and Wisconsin firefighters have teamed up into hand crews working remote backcountry in Manitoba, cutting fire lines with chainsaws and shovels. So the do they even fight them answer is yes, they do, very hard, with international backup. The forests are just crazy big. For what it's worth, this year's fire season in Canada is actually running below their recent pace. 3,137 fires and 1.4 million hectares burned this season, versus over 4.6 million hectares at this point last year. And we're still getting smoked out in Lake County. A below-average Canadian fire year still means the air quality alerts here are pretty bad. Let that sink in for a second. Here's where we don't want to really kid around, because the science on this is genuinely concerning. The main villain is something called PM 2.5, the particulate matter. Particles so small that they can penetrate deep into the respiratory system and enter the bloodstream, causing both acute and chronic diseases. These aren't visible specks of ash. They're microscopic. Your nose hairs, your throat, all your body's normal filters are useless. These particles walk right past that security. In short term, the National Weather Service says these pollutants can cause headaches, irritated eyes, sinuses, fatigue, difficulty breathing, chest pains, asthma attacks, and increased coughing. If you've ever had a mystery headache on a hazy day, that might not have been a mystery. But here's the finding that really got my attention. For years, regulators basically treated all PM 2.5 the same. Pollution is pollution, right? That was apparently the strategy, but it's totally wrong. A study out of Southern California found respiratory hospitalizations increased up to 10% with a given rise in wildfire-specific PM 2.5. Compare that to roughly 1% for the same amount of regular pollution. So, I'll say that again. Wildfire smoke particles may be up to 10 times harder on your lungs than ordinary urban smog at the same concentration. This isn't just smells like camping. This is meaningfully worse air. And now I want to share my favorite hunch that turned out to be legitimate science. I've always wondered personally, when a wildfire tears through an area, it's not just trees burning, right? Yeah. Fires in areas where development meets wildlands are particularly concerning because of toxins that get released from burning man-made structures. Specifically, that smoke can contain traces from buildings, vehicles, infrastructure, and the ash can contain hazardous materials like asbestos and heavy metals. Burned houses, burned vehicles, burned whatever was in the garage is vaporized and now airborne. It gets weirder with Canada specifically. Canada's forests have long been mined. Operations loaded soils and waterways with toxic metals like lead and mercury, especially before clean air standards were kicked in about 50 years ago. So the smoke may be uniquely toxic. And on top of that, wildfire smoke contains volatile organic compounds like benzene, hydrogen cyanide, polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, most of which are not regularly monitored, even during wildfires. Not monitored, meaning when your weather app shows you the AQI number, it's tracking the particles, not the full chemical cocktail riding along with them. Nobody on the ground here has a complete inventory of what's in that haze. That's not me fear-mongering, that's just the actual state of the monitoring. Which brings me to a couple I know who actually left, not permanently, but during one of these smoke events. They packed up and got out of the area for a few days. And when they told me, my first instinct was, that seems a little dramatic. Like, it's just haze, guys, a little bit of smoke. But the more I learned while researching for this episode, the more I've come around to kind of agreeing with them. They weren't only worried about wood smoke, they were worried about exactly this, the stuff that nobody's measuring. And you know what? Officials basically agree with them. Health authorities say this air is especially harmful to sensitive groups, children, older adults, people with lung diseases like asthma and COPD. So if a smoke event is forecast to park over us for 3 or 4 days and you've got the flexibility, a long weekend somewhere with clean air isn't really overreacting, it's just reacting. I keep going back and forth on this myself, especially since these events seem to keep surprising us. If the air in your own town is officially rated very unhealthy, at what number do you actually change your plans? Now, if leaving isn't an option, and for most of us with jobs and kids and lives, it isn't easy or isn't at least convenient, here's the real playbook, and it's more specific than stay inside. First, keep doors, windows, fireplace dampers shut, and run your air conditioning on the recirculation setting. That recirculate button in your car and on your AC, this is the moment to use it. Don't pull in the outside air, you're just importing the problem. Remember, the smoke got down into our layer because the atmosphere put a lid on it. Your house gets to have its own lid too, so use it. Second, and this is the one everybody gets wrong, don't count on a dust mask. Ordinary dust masks and cloth face coverings won't really help. They still let more dangerous, smaller particles pass right through. You need an N95 or N100 truly to filter out the damaging fine particles. That bandana might look fetch, but it's doing absolutely nothing for your lungs. Third, if you've got a HEPA air purifier, run it. If you don't, one decent purifier in the bedroom is honestly one of the better health purchases you can make in 2026. I actually have an LG Aero Tower, and it's a fantastic purifier. And even though the air inside my house actually looked pretty clean and I didn't smell it inside, the LCD screen on the Aero Tower air purifier actually said unhealthy. So it knew what was up. Fourth, check airnow.gov before you plan anything outdoors. It's free and it's the official EPA data, and it takes about 10 seconds to check. Don't trust your nose. If you step outside and get that barbecue smell, the smoke is at ground level with you. That's a full stop right there. Skip the outdoor workout on these days. Exercising in smoke means breathing deeper and pulling in more of it. This may be the one time skipping your run is genuinely a healthier choice, so you're welcome. And keep an eye on the sensitive people in your life, the kids, grandparents, anyone with asthma or heart issues. Even many of the park districts have moved activities indoors because of the air quality or canceled them altogether. Look, Lake County didn't light a single match in this situation, and yet here we are, breathing the consequences of fires burning 1,000 miles away in another country, some of which are deliberately allowed to burn. 3 smoke summers in 4 years tells me this is the new normal, and the new normal deserves an actual plan. a purifier, some N100 masks in the closet, an eye on the AQI, and zero shame about bailing town for a clean air weekend when the purple haze rolls in. Smoke is going to keep coming. It doesn't mean we have to keep being surprised by it. I would say stay safe and stay inside, but I personally hate it when people tell me what to do. Do whatever you want, but that's the information. I'll see you next time. When I first started on YouTube, I had no idea what I was doing, and I just kind of stumbled my way to finding a little bit of success with hundreds of thousands of subscribers, hundreds of millions of views, YouTube Creator Awards, hundreds of thousands of dollars in income generated, and I shared my personal journey in this book, The Accidental YouTuber. But over the years, a ton of people have asked me, how do I get started? How do I pick a niche? How do I pick a topic? How do I start recording, editing? How do I make money? These are all the typical questions of people that just want to start out on YouTube for whatever reason. And I've helped people where I can. But I finally decided, why not put those ideas into a new book? And so this one is The Intentional YouTuber, a beginner's step-by-step guide to your very first video. And this one takes you from doing nothing to figuring out what kind of content you should create, what topics you should cover. Do you want to support an existing business? Do you want to just share your hobbies, your family, your excursions, whatever it may be? This one will take you from doing nothing to publishing your very first video. So I'm hoping that it will help you on your YouTube expedition. And if you want to get started today in a fun, easy way, then check out this book. I'll put a link to it in the description. I'll see you later.